This is the second of a three-part dinner series that we are calling Tastes of the World, Voices That Inspire, and it's brought to you by the Hingham Unity Council. My name's Andrew Turner, and I'm a member of the HUC board, and I'm the chairperson for this program year 2024-2025. I'm really thrilled to see a packed house. Thank you, Kim. This is wonderful to bring so many of you out here, yes? We have some familiar faces, we have some new faces, and so thank you so much. Some of you were here for Dan Osborne a few weeks ago, and we're really thrilled to have Kim, who I'll introduce in a moment. Really quickly, I wanted to provide everybody with some background on our group. The Hingham Unity Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group formed in 2019 to facilitate open, respectful, in-person dialogue about systemic issues that affect human dignity with the goal of creating a more inclusive and welcoming community. The HUC is committed to promoting a culture where every person in our community knows that they belong and feel supported. We do this in a number of different ways, but our event here tonight is a perfect example of what we do best. Create opportunities to bring people together to share stories, exchange ideas, get to know one another, with the goal of helping people expand their horizons, break down barriers, meet new people, and learn new things. What a better way to do that than sharing a meal with our neighbors. From our caterers, May Dumplings, and Irene Lee. Irene is the founder and owner of May, and we're so grateful for the delicious food. I hope you all are enjoying it very much. I'm excited to get in that thing. Thank you. And we're really excited to hear from Kim and Maura this evening in 1 second. I also wanted to thank Joan. I don't know if Joan is here this evening. Our state representative, Joan Moschino, helped secure a grant for this program. And so we are very grateful for Joan's support of the Unity Council and her commitment to making Hingham and all of our South Shore communities places that welcome everyone, regardless of their race, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, gender, disability, or anything else. And so Joan's leadership is paramount to this series, so let's please give her a round of applause. Now, to introduce our speaker, I'd like to invite someone from our own community who has lived in Hingham for 22 years. She's worked in television broadcasting her entire career as a host and reporter for Lifetime Television, ESPN, NBC Sports, and more. In recent years, she's contributed to Hingham's very own cable TV channel, Harbor Media, where she has hosted the 4th of July Parade, among other programs, and she is currently covering this event for the station. Also, she happened to connect us to our guest speaker tonight, so let's bring up Maura Driscoll-Farden.
Thank you, Andrew. And it's so nice to see this room filled with so many friends and neighbors from Hingham and around the South Shore. I am thrilled to be part of this event in a small way, as Andrew mentioned, through Harbor Media's coverage, but also through my personal connection with our talented and impressive guest speaker, Kim Anthony. And I want to tell you a little bit about that, because in 1986, Kim Hamilton Anthony and I became teammates for the first time on the UCLA women's gymnastics team. I was a sophomore. Oh, thank you. I was a sophomore, and Kim was a freshman. And that year, she entered the school and the program as the first African-American gymnast ever to receive a full athletic scholarship at UCLA. And that deserves applause. And let me tell you, as a gymnast and as a performer, she was also one of a kind. She burst onto the collegiate gymnastics scene, not only changing the face of the sport, but amassing numerous individual titles and accolades along the way. Always humble, always unassuming, and always sensational when she took to the competition floor. And I have to say personally, being in the gym every day with her and training every day was an honor, and it was just such a fun, amazing experience. And she was exceptional on the floor exercise, and this is something that my teammates and I, our entire team, still talk about today, nearly 40 years later. I know, right? So you know the kind of dynamic and expressive and mesmerizing dance, choreography, and showmanship that you see with the top college floor routines today that go viral on YouTube. So this was before YouTube and before social media. Kimmy did that first, and she did it better than anyone. And I can prove it because she went on to win 3 national floor exercise titles in a row during her college years, accomplishing another first. That's something that no one else has done. And the only reason it wasn't 4 in a row was because she was injured her senior year and wasn't able to compete to defend her title. And I'm still not over it. I'm trying. I'm working on it all these years later. But seriously, there's so much more to Kim than her athletic prowess and important firsts. It is her personal story, her incredible journey that is so inspiring. So to learn a little more about that, we're going to direct our attention to the video monitor, where another friend of hers, someone you may recognize from the Super Bowl, James Brown, will do a special feature.
It is my privilege to introduce you to my friend, Kim Anthony. When Kim was watching Nadia Comaneci score a perfect 10 in the 1976 Olympics, she decided that she wanted to be a gymnast too. Kim pursued her dream even in the midst of challenging circumstances and against much opposition, surrounded by drugs, violence, and financial hardship. And to top it off, as a young African-American girl in the 70s, she was competing in a sport with few gymnasts who looked like her. Even so, after years of hard work and determination, she became a pioneer and role model. Kim not only achieved her goal, but exceeded it by becoming an elite gymnast, a U.S. national team member, and an international gold medalist. She then went on to UCLA as the first African-American female to receive a gymnastics scholarship. While there, she became a 6-time All-American, 4-time national champion, and was named to the Pac-12 All-Century team. After graduating from UCLA, Kim became a wife and mother, a TV sports analyst, international speaker, and was inducted into both the UCLA and the Virginia Sports Halls of Fame. You can learn more about Kim in her memoir titled Unfavorable Odds. I am thrilled that you will get a chance to hear from her today. Kim Anthony, a trophy of God's grace.
Pretty impressive, right? Well, in addition to all of that, there's actually so much more. So I'm going to just give a few more bullet points. One thing that I always like to share is that she was also a Hollywood stunt woman, a little known fact. And she is a podcast host for the Resilience to Brilliance podcast, which she developed and produced. And she's the creator of what she calls Brilliance Mode, which is a concept and vision that she teaches that comes to life when a person's identity, purpose, and resilience converge and align. So whether it's through inspiring keynotes like this, or empowering workshops, or transformational coaching, Kim's message of hope and resilience has impacted hundreds of thousands, and tonight we get to hear from her in Hingham. It is my incredible honor to introduce you to tonight's speaker, my UCLA Bruin sister and dear friend, Kim Anthony.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Would you take this one for me? Thank you. How's everyone doing? Mara, what a kind introduction. Thank you. I appreciate it. Will you travel with me and just introduce me everywhere I go? It is such an honor to be here. And when Mara reached out to me and she told me that there would be someone reaching out from the Hingham Unity Council, my first thought was, I don't know that I do those types of events. And I said, but I'll have a conversation with them for sure. And when I met Katie, Michelle, and Leslie, I was floored by the mission that Andrew just talked about. Oh my goodness, if every community could do what you all are doing, the world would be a much better place. So thank you, Andrew, Michelle, Leslie, and Katie, for inviting me to be a part of this incredible event. I'm absolutely honored. I'm truly honored. And the fact that all of you are in this room right now because you care. You care about people. And I hope that my story, as I share it, will help you to learn a little bit more about the life that I lived and some other people are living who may not have ended up where I've ended up. And I hope that somehow it will help you to be a light to someone else. Imagine what it would be like living in the poor area of town in a 2-bedroom house with 10 to 13 of your relatives, 3 generations. There's no indoor plumbing. The toilet is in an outhouse at the end of the backyard. Showers are taken on the back porch, and if you want to take a bath, you have to do so in a tin tub in the middle of the kitchen floor. Times are hard. There's lots of mouths to feed, bills to pay, and there is definitely not room for another. Well, this is a situation in which my mother found herself. She was the youngest in the bunch. She was a teenager in love for the very first time. Yet she would have to go home and tell her parents that there would be yet another mouth to feed because she was pregnant. Now, my mother's pregnancy was clearly unplanned, a mistake I've been called many times. So she was pressured to end the pregnancy, and she was shown exactly how she could do it so that I would not become another poor soul born into a desperate situation. Now, she was confused and she was scared, and because this advice came from someone she loved and respected, she thought that a self-induced abortion was the only way. But after several failed attempts, she refused to keep trying. And I believe it was because deep in her heart, she knew she had made a mistake with her choices, perhaps. But she also believed that God didn't make mistakes, so she chose to have me. So my life was spared when I was allowed to make it to full term. But still, there would be a struggle for me to enter into the world, because when my mother was 5 years old, she was hit by a car. It was a drunk driver, and that car dragged her little body for a block, and it crushed her pelvic bone. So when it came time for her to deliver, the doctors ran into some complications. And they told her that, well, either you live or your child will live, but one of you will not survive. And that brave teenager had another opportunity to opt out of motherhood, but she told those doctors, you do whatever you can to save my baby, even if I'll lose my life. Well, during the cesarean birth, my head was caught within her pelvic bone, and they thought they would have to break my neck in order to free me, which would, of course, cost my life. But then, out of nowhere, this doctor came in, and he believed he could save both mother and child. And that's exactly what he did. A second time, my life was spared. Now, shortly after I was born, my parents decided to get married, and I wish I could tell you that they lived happily ever after, but unfortunately that was not the case. My father joined the Army and was sent overseas, and he witnessed some things there that traumatized him. He watched U.S. military policemen abuse and kill U.S. black soldiers. And of course, he was devastated. And in order to numb the pain, he started using drugs. So when we came back to the U.S., he was often unemployed, more often getting high on drugs, and he became abusive. And when I looked into the eyes of my mother, I knew that I had value, at least enough value that she would tell me she loved me, she worked hard to provide for me, and she did the best she could. But when I looked into the eyes of my father, it didn't seem as if I had much value at all, at least not enough for him to hang around. You see, he would disappear for weeks on end, and there were times when he wouldn't even show up for holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas. And there was one Christmas that I remember like it was yesterday. I went into the living room to celebrate with my mom, and I saw her sitting there all by herself. My dad hadn't bothered to come home to celebrate with us. But there were still all of these beautifully wrapped presents under the tree. So I sat on the floor across from my mom, and I grabbed each one of those boxes, tore off the wrapping paper, opened up the boxes, pulled back the tissue paper. But all I found in each one of those boxes was a small note. And on those notes were written what my mother would have gotten me if she had the money to do so. Now, my father wasn't there for us at that time, and there were plenty of times when he wasn't there, but I can't say that he was completely absent from my life, because when I was about 6 years old, he taught me how to roll joints. Yeah, and I got very good at it. And he would show me off in front of his friends, and I would go to these parties with him, and there was a time when he had one of his little parties in our teeny tiny apartment, a one-bedroom apartment that was located behind a beauty parlor, behind a business. And there I sat, the only child in this smoke-filled room, and on the coffee table in front of me were all the drugs of choice. And there I sat, across from the adults, rolling joints, making my daddy proud. And in my mind, I had finally found some value and worth in his eyes. So much so that I thought that if I could learn how to make the most popular drug on the street at the time, that I could earn his love. And so I found out that the drug dealer who lived next door to us, right across, it was a row house, right across the railing, I found out that he knew how to make the most popular drug in the streets at that time. And so I went to his house and I watched him step by step by step make crack, because I thought that if I could just learn how to do that, then I would really make my daddy proud. Well, it seemed as if I would become just another product of the drug and ghetto mentality, so to speak. But I had this dream, this crazy dream of becoming a world-class gymnast. I didn't want to become a basketball star, not a track star, which was common in my neighborhood. But as you saw in the video, gymnastics was my thing. And I was one of those kids who spent more time upside down than I spent right side up. And I actually did my first vault as a toddler. My mom told me that I would run through the hallway and into the bedroom and bounce and go up and over the side of my crib. And she said she had never seen a child that young do anything like that, because most kids couldn't even crawl up into their bed by themselves. And so I was that child. And people thought I was going to hurt myself. And one day, I was bounding around the house, and the 1976 Olympics were on. And Nadia Comaneci caught my eye. And I stopped, and I sat down, and I watched her score perfect tens. And that is when I realized that all the things that I had been doing is actually a thing. It's a real sport. Before that, I had no idea that anything I was doing could become a competitive opportunity for me. And when I saw her do her thing, I jumped up and I said, I can do that. And then I ran and pounced and did a front flip and landed flat on my back in my grandmother's living room. And the boom shook that Section 8 house. And my grandmother was not happy. I decided to get the pillows off of the good sofa, right? Because it was a front room, the good sofa, the good pillows, and I cushioned my landing. But I was still bumping into the tables, knocking over lamps. And my grandmother, again, she was not happy. So she kicked me outside to the concrete sidewalks, or the concrete stairs and the brick sidewalks of Richmond, Virginia. And I had to be smart because she wouldn't let me take her pillows, although I tried. And I taught myself how to do side aerials and cartwheels and all types of things. And the back fence near the alley became my balance beam. And I loved pretending to be a gymnast. Well, my mother was not happy with my antics because she thought that I was seriously going to get injured. And she would try to get me to stop, but she couldn't, and so she signed me up for a recreational class. So we didn't have a car at the time. We were living with my grandmother, and it took us 2 city buses to get to class. And when I got there, and I walked into that gym, it was as if the heavens opened up and the angels started to sing, because I had never seen that much blue equipment, mats, and everything, all of these wonderful things that I could be a part of. And during the class, as we were rotating from event to event, I got bored with what we were learning, and I would go to the high bar or go to the high beam, and I kept getting in trouble. So at the end of the class, the coach calls me over, and I'm thinking, oh no, he's going to tell me to never, ever come back again. And to my surprise, he asked me, he said, Kim, where have you been training? And I said, outside on my grandmother's sidewalk. And he said, well, what have you taught yourself to do? And so he had me perform all of my skills and invited me on the spot to be on the competitive team. So I didn't even have a leotard. I had a t-shirt and some shorts, and he said, well, if you want to be on the team, then you need a leotard. And they had a little pro shop, and they said I could purchase a leotard there. And the leotard was this Kelly green V-neck zip-up polyester type deal. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And I loved it, but it cost $8. And my mother didn't have the money for it. But they let me take it, and they told her that she could pay them back when she did have the money. So I had that one leotard for the longest time, and we would just wash it in between the days that I trained. And there was something that happened between the time that I started school and the time that I started gymnastics. Now, this school, my elementary school in Virginia, was desegregated in 1972, and I started kindergarten in 1973. So I had friends from all backgrounds with me, and I loved them, they loved me, and actually it was a little girl, a little white girl, whom I was best friends with, who taught us that there was a gym that I could go to train. And so since we didn't have a car, we would carpool. I would carpool with her. But then as I began to climb the ranks, she wasn't able to take me because she wasn't going as often as I was. But during my elementary school years, it was in 1977, which was shortly before I started gymnastics, there was a TV series that came out called Roots. And until I saw that series, I had never heard anyone talk about the experience of Black people in America, in the US. And it did something to me. It was very hard to watch, and I had a hard time believing it was true, but yet I knew it was true, and I would ask my mom, what is this? What is this? And that TV series caused a lot of tension in our school, our segregated school. And people began to become divided, and all of a sudden, and I don't know, as a young person, all of a sudden, we all became a different color. Whereas before, we were just all friends. But now, there's this history that we are made aware of, and it divided us. And so I was no longer close with my dear friends whom I loved because of this thing called racism. And it was a challenge. And I'll tell you what also happened is after I watched that series, I started to feel less than. I started to wonder if I was as smart as, or valuable as, or talented as the people who didn't look like me. And it did something, and it was far below consciousness. I didn't realize that until I look back now, but I did have this belief that I was not as good as the other girls, and I would never be as good. And so I made it to the state meet, my first few months out, and I came across there was another little black girl. She was the only other one in the state meet. And there was a skill called a dive roll. And you're supposed to, so these are my feet, these are my hands, head. So in a dive roll, you go like this, right? So in the compulsory, we were supposed to do an arch dive roll and roll out. Well, everybody in my club, they were doing piked dive rolls like this, which was the minimum. And I saw this little black girl do an arched. It was beautiful. She did an arch and she rolled out. And that, believe it or not, gave me permission to do an arch dive roll too. And so the next time, my next turn, I did my arch dive roll, and my coach looked at me and said, "Where in the world did that come from?" And I didn't tell him that I saw her do it, so I did it too. But as I look back, seeing someone who looked like me perform with excellence gave me permission to perform with excellence too. And I never looked back after that. Now, desiring to become a world-class gymnast is a crazy dream, especially for a little black girl in the hood back in the 70s. And there wasn't a single day that went by that I didn't have someone telling me that. There were people who told me that gymnastics was not meant for little girls who looked like me and that I should quit. I had a coach who constantly told me that I would never have what it takes to be one of the best. And she would literally scream across the 20,000 square foot gym, and the whole gym would go silent. She would be on one side, I would be on the other, and she would berate me time after time, telling me everything that I could never be. And I had no idea what I had done to deserve that treatment. And it ripped me to shreds. And it would come to be that even when I got to the elite level and was on the US national team, traveling the world, winning gold medals internationally, my self-esteem was so shot because of her, I never thought I was any good. Everything I did, I guess it just happened. Maybe it was by mistake, maybe everybody else messed up and I won. That wasn't true, but I could not believe in myself because I had a coach who didn't believe in me and told me that I would never be the best. Well, let me backtrack to where I started to train 5 and 6 days a week. So we were living with my grandmother, and she lived across town. It would take 2 city buses to get there. And because I had to practice so much, my mom saved up her money and moved us into an apartment that was located right behind, just yards away from the gym, so that I could walk to practice. But what this meant is that she had to commute for 2 hours every day on the bus back and forth to work. So she was willing to sacrifice so that I could live my dream. To help pay for my training, we cleaned the 20,000 square foot gym at night. I trained until 10 o'clock at night, and then we would sweep, scrub toilets, and vacuum, and do all of the things to make sure the gym was ready the next day. And sometimes we would be tired at night, at 10 o'clock at night, and we'd wake up at 5 the next morning to do it. And I remember it being so difficult I was so exhausted because I was literally carrying out 17-hour days. Now, my mother, she ended up being our sole provider. And my father gradually moved out of the picture, and he would come back when it was convenient. So one of the things we did to raise funds was to set up a coat check stand in a nightclub. And at 2 in the morning, they would clear the floor, and I would do my gymnastics routine so that they could see where their money was going. And again, because we didn't have a car and the buses weren't running that late, we had to walk 10 miles home. So while my teammates were warm and safe in their beds, I was out walking the streets of Richmond, Virginia after having raised money so that I could train alongside them. It was not an easy life. So I literally lived in these two different worlds. And on one occasion, in my own home, I would literally come home from school and see this dreaded orange neon sign on the front door of our apartment because there was an eviction notice telling us when we needed to vacate. And I remember being so embarrassed, and I would run across the parking lot and rip down that paper, and then I'd go inside and shut the door quickly because we had no furniture and I didn't want my friends to see, because we couldn't afford to buy a sofa or a chair. Now, most of the time, as I mentioned, we lived with relatives. We would go from one relative to another, and it was very challenging to be able to be out on our own. But we were now living in this apartment that was ours. And furniture or no furniture, we were grateful. Even with the eviction notices that we received, we never lost our home, because when my mom was in need, she swallowed her pride and denied shame its power, and she asked for help. And fortunately for us, there were individuals who were willing to assist. But still, she felt alone, ashamed, embarrassed, and hopeless. And I know this to be true because I would sit outside of her bedroom window or her bedroom door listening to her cry herself to sleep at night, because she didn't know how she was going to keep food on the table and keep a roof over our heads. Now, it's not that she was a lazy woman. It wasn't that she wasn't smart. She was absolutely brilliant. And she had received a full academic scholarship to go to college. But the reason she didn't go is because her parents couldn't afford the $25 application fee. Her circumstances trumped her opportunity. So I had this world on one side. And on the other side, I was traveling the world, staying in 5-star hotels, eating at fancy restaurants. There were limousines and police escorts, paparazzi, and all of these things going on. And in 1984, Vidal Sassoon sponsored the U.S. national team. And they did makeovers with all the athletes. And my makeover was significantly different. Like, the before and after was drastic. And I have a picture of it in my book. And so they invited me to go to the Today Show. They pick my coach and me up in this limo. They whisked us off to the Ritz-Carlton to drop off our things. And then we head to the salon where Vidal Sassoon himself washes and styles my hair. So I'm 16 years old in New York City and about to be on the Today Show. And I would leave that trip, and I would leave all of those experiences, those 5-star experiences, and I'd go back home to this partially furnished apartment, mostly empty refrigerator. And there were times when my mother watched me eat dinner because she would say that she wasn't hungry. But now as I look back as an adult, it is quite possible that she wasn't eating because there wasn't enough for the both of us. So I battled embarrassment. I was ashamed, and I struggled emotionally. And there were times when I would cry uncontrollably when I was in school, and I wasn't even able to tell the teachers or the students what was wrong because I didn't know. But the truth was that I was under such, thank you. I was under such an immense amount of pressure at home and in the gym. And I was actually on the verge of breaking. But in spite of the discouraging words, in spite of my financial situation and all of the traumatic things that were happening, I continued to work hard and soon found myself on the U.S. national team, traveling the world, representing our country, and then went on to UCLA and experienced some significant things there. And it's interesting, I look back now, my mother, she never talked to me about going to college. Because think about it, she had a scholarship to go to college but wasn't able to go because of the application fee. And she did not want me to experience that same disappointment. So my coach had to encourage her to allow me to apply to college. And then I go to UCLA, and arriving on campus at UCLA was like stepping into a movie. It seemed that all the beautiful and brightest people had converged on this campus. The kids were driving BMWs, Porsches, or they're riding around in their shiny scooters, and of course, I couldn't afford either of those things. Celebrity sightings were commonplace. And I realized that I was in a special place when I looked at the list of Hall of Famers, like Jackie Robinson, Arthur Ashe, and we had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar speak at our freshman orientation. I was no longer on Cary Street. So even there, I struggled in these different worlds. I didn't quite fit in with my teammates outside of the gym, but I also didn't fit in with the black students on campus because they labeled me whitewashed because I was doing gymnastics. So I spent a lot of time alone. One thing I will say about sport is it has the ability to break down racial barriers. Because even though I didn't live the same lifestyle as my teammates, when we were in that gym, we were sisters. Now they, nor my coaches, knew all the trauma I had experienced or the challenging things that I was going through in my family life. But they loved me, they encouraged me, and they made sure that I had everything that I need. So even though I had this dark cloud that followed me, that made me want to isolate, they brought the best out in me. And I could come into the gym with the weight of the world on my shoulders, and this woman right here encouraged me to no end. She always had a smile on her face. She treated me like her little sister. And I am forever grateful for you. So my teammates, they were a part of me winning 4 national titles and becoming a Hall of Famer. There is no way I could have done it without them. And it didn't matter the color of my skin. We just loved each other, and we had a common goal as athletes. I'd say sometimes the sport of gymnastics saved my life because I have people that I was around growing up whose lives took a drastic turn downward. And so it's always an honor for me to share my story. And as challenging as it was worth it. Because living in these two different worlds, I was doing that in the midst of trying to find my own identity. It was hard. And I'll give you, I mean, it may be a simple example, but the way I spoke. I couldn't take the same slang that I used in my neighborhood and bring it into the gym, or I would be publicly shamed and corrected, which did happen. But then I also couldn't take the formal or proper English into some of those neighborhood situations, or I would be chastised and accused of trying to be white or thinking that I'm better than everybody else. So I had to work to keep those two worlds separate. But the good thing about growing up in those challenging times, even though I wish at times that that wasn't my situation, as I look back, I'm so grateful for the hardships. I'm so grateful for the exposure that gymnastics gave me, because now I get to make different choices. And now, because of those special relationships in the gym with people who didn't look like me, and those relationships at home that I get to understand the lifestyles, I'm able to approach people without automatically judging them and placing stereotypes on them, because I'm able to look at the character. So when I meet you, I'm not going to use your outward appearance to determine whether I like you or not, or whether I want to work with you or not. I know that now that there are good and bad people no matter what culture you're in. So looking at the character and the heart is what's most important. Now, we all have a story, and they all include challenges, triumphs, joys, and pains. And I believe that we have much more in common than we have in differences. Some have greater resources, connections, and opportunities, and others may have limited resources and connections. And perhaps, like my mom, and in some cases my life, sometimes the circumstances get in the way of any opportunities that are brought their way. Now, if you were to see my life outside of the gym growing up, well, you would probably assume that my future was hopeless and that nothing good could possibly happen. But if you see me walk into a boardroom, or you consider my past accomplishments, you may assume that I had a totally different life. It can be easy to judge people based on what we see. But my hope is that as I've shared some pieces of my story, that you can better understand how every single person in this world has value and has purpose. And if they are just given a chance, they may be able to go out and change the world and have a great impact. Now, I want to thank you for listening to my story, and I'd like to open it up for questions, if you'd like. Thank you. Oh. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You are very kind. I appreciate your care. Now, let's talk. Is there anything that I said that raised a question in your mind that you'd like me to explain further Or is there just something that comes to mind, period, that you want to ask me about? Yes, Laura. So the question is, the gymnastics career is so short. How did I meet the need when it was time to do something else? So my career ended, Mara shared, it ended early, my senior year, and I had an injury that put me in a cast. But my coaches thought that they would bring me back before nationals, and they had me training on bars and a cast and a boot and all types of things. I'm trying to get me ready. And I re-injured myself. And so I wasn't able to come back because, things were pushed too early. And I missed nationals. And I thought, that is the worst way to end your career ever. Because I was peaking at that time. And it broke my heart that I had to stop. But here's what happened. 10 years later, I was being inducted into UCLA's Hall of Fame. And I'm looking down this list of accolades they had on the program that I had accomplished. Most of them I didn't even realize I had done. But they listed the floor titles, and there were 3. And in my mind, I said, it should have been 4. But it wasn't, and I maybe that sounds arrogant, but I wanted to at least try for that 4th title. And so I was still upset. This is 10 years later. And then all of a sudden, I started to remember the situation that led to me getting injured. And in this particular meet where I was injured, I had landed my vault straight up and down without bending my knees, and I got whiplash. And I blacked out a little bit. And before that, I had been having shooting pains through my neck. And have so much so that I would have to stop on campus wherever I was and wait until the pain could go away, until the pain went away, because I couldn't walk and handle the pain at the same time. Well, when my coach told me that they realized that they couldn't bring me back, he also told me, well, I guess I can tell you this now, but when the doctors x-rayed your neck, they found that it is straight and it doesn't have that curve. And if you would have continued to land your vaults the way you did, you could be paralyzed or lose your life. And when I remembered that same meet that I blacked out on the vault was the same meet that I injured my foot. And I simply think it's by the grace of God, because my coach was not going to stop me from competing, knowing that I could severely injure myself. But God said, no, we're not having this. So I think when your time comes where a career ends and it's time to start something new, I think celebrating what you've done and parlaying all the lessons you've learned into that next phase is so important. And understanding who you are, clarifying your purpose, embracing your authentic identity, and walking in the fullness of who you were designed to be and what you are designed to do, I think is the key to any transition, whether you're transitioning out of sport or transitioning from one job to the other. I think if you have that attitude, it can only get better. Oh my goodness. I quit once. I did quit. And then I stood at my back door and watched the gym. I just stared out at the gym the entire time. But it was a full practice. Yeah, it was fun. It was a full practice. Yeah. So what kept me going when I was in club gymnastics was the fact that gymnastics gave me the ability to control something. My family life was completely out of control. I couldn't do anything about it. But what I could do is determine how many times I wanted to flip in the air and twist in the air. And it was my therapy. So that's what kept me going. And when I went to college is when my faith came in. And that became why I performed. Instead of performing to try to earn approval and acceptance from everybody, the judges, the coaches, the fans, I started to perform for an audience of one. No, they had it pretty easy. They did. I'm not sure if I understand your question. If you're asking, how do I make sure that they're learning those types of life lessons that I learned the hard way? As much as you want your kids to listen to you and avoid all the things that you went through, they don't. They do their own thing. They make their own decision. And I think probably one of the best, or the type of lessons that kids catch and hold on to, are those that take place when they make poor decisions. Not forgiving someone is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And if I hold on to bitterness, resentment, and unforgiveness, I'm hurting myself, not the other person. So I have forgiven him for that, and I'm able to move on because of it. Because if I choose not to forgive, then my past will keep me from my purpose. Remember I talked about that story at state meet, my first state meet, when I saw the other black gymnast do this arched dive roll? Have you heard of the phrase representation matters? That is what that is about. When you see someone who looks like you doing something that you aspire to do, that gives you the courage and the power and just the drive to do it all the more. So I would encourage you, if there's an opportunity that you're presenting, can you find out if there is a person who looks like them who is doing it, so that they can see, oh, wow, he's doing that, then I can do it too. My mom, I said this before, she was such an amazing cheerleader for me. She was the most optimistic. She's like Amora, right? She's the most optimistic person that I've ever known. And she would see me getting down, and she would come and start singing this song, Be Optimistic, like from a Shirley Temple movie or something. It was, I mean, she just believed in me. So she's the one. I mean, if she was not in my life, I would not have been a gymnast at all. Yeah. I loved gymnastics. I love flying through. There is no feeling like flying through the sky and being in control, full control of your body. There's no other sport you can be in that gives you that type of feeling and control. I do believe that I would have persevered through whatever, if I wanted to be a dancer, which was also an option for me, or whatever. I would have persevered, because I learned from my mother, as she lived that hard life, that persevering is when you rise and rise again in the face of adversity. So she taught me perseverance, and I believe that I would have been able to apply that wherever I went. Thank you for that question. I know I got it from my mom, super positive woman, just was going after it. You know, she was a single mom. You know, my dad was in and out of the picture. She took a Dale Carnegie course, and I would sit in the back with my little coloring book, because she didn't go to college because of the circumstances I shared. But she never stopped dreaming for herself. She not only dreamed for me, she dreamed for herself, and I got to watch her pursue her dream and achieve her dream. And she went on to become a vice president of an insurance company with only a high school degree. Talk about it, right, right. Yes, yay, mom. Yes. So, and I don't know where she got that from, because she was, I don't know if this is right, an anomaly in her family, because she had been told that she should do what everybody else was doing. And she didn't want to. She had a different dream. And all I can say is maybe God just put that in her and put it in me so that we could break that cycle of poverty. Well, okay, so I was not always this nice. I just want you to know. Okay, so, okay. I was not always this nice, so that helps. It humanizes me, right? So my environment that I grew up in, my dad, he taught me how to roll joints when I was little, and also, like when I was 12, he taught me how to take a gun from somebody if they were pointing it at you, because evidently he figured I would end up in that situation somehow. And so I remember practicing, and he'd tell me, you have to turn it this way to make sure it does. If it goes off, it doesn't hit you. And so I knew all that in middle school. But the summer after my freshman year, I went back home to Virginia, and I was hanging out with some of my friends. And there were some words exchanged between me or the guys I was with and some people who were already in the parking lot. And it was over something really silly. And we went up to this fast food restaurant, and we were about to go inside. But all of a sudden I heard this screaming and yelling coming up behind me. And I turned around to see what was going on, and I found myself staring down the barrel of a gun. And he was holding it point blank to my head. And behind that gun was an angry young man who was telling me that he was going to take my life that night. And at that moment, it didn't matter how I grew up. It didn't matter whether my daddy was going to come home that night. It didn't even matter that I had just won my first NCAA national championship title just a few months before. Everything that I looked to give me value was all of a sudden worth absolutely nothing. And it is by the grace of God that I walked away from that event unharmed, but I walked away thinking there has to be more to life than this. You live, you die, and for what purpose? And that very next fall, I went back to UCLA, and I met a young man, a football player, who shared with me that there was more to life than what I had been experiencing. And he shared that God loved me, had a plan for my life, and that I could actually have a personal relationship with God the Father through Jesus Christ. He had no idea that I almost lost my life just a few months before, and that I was looking for the meaning of life. But in that moment, I thought, all my life I've been trying to get my earthly father to love me, and here you are telling me that there's a God in heaven who loves me and wants to have a relationship with me? I'm in. And so I prayed, and I asked Jesus to come into my life and make me the person he wanted me to be. And the angels didn't sing like they did in the gym that day. But something happened. Something started to change in me. I was no longer mean and fixated on death. And my vocabulary changed. And I started to realize that my value and identity isn't based on my performance, my popularity, or any of those things, that my value is based on the fact that God loves me and created me for a purpose. And so that's how it happened. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Yeah.
I was going to take one more, but you got to end on that.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. Thank you.